everyone, and welcome to Hit and Hustle from irishsportsdaily.com. I'm your host, Greg Flamong, and with me, as always, is Jamie Uwayama, Mr. Jamie University. It is Tuesday, June 11th, and we have a recruiting show for you today. We're going to talk about the official visits that took place last weekend, who is on campus right now, and who is going to be on campus next weekend as Notre Dame looks to close out the 2025 class with a bang. A prediction just went up at Irish Sports Daily. Matt Freeman put in a prediction. We're going to talk about who that is and what we think about that in just 1 second. Talk about Deuce Knight winning MVP at the OT7 7-on-7 tournament. So that's obviously good, right? We like to see that. We'll talk about Ivan Taylor taking visits to other schools. That is not a good thing, but I don't think it's as bad as people think or might think in the current moment. We'll talk about that as well. And so it's going to be a very recruiting centric podcast today. Thank you everyone for tuning in. If you like what you heard, please hit the like, please hit subscribe, please hit the notification bell so you know whatever it is we are going live. Links to the podcast, as always, are going to be in the description below. Notre Dame is looking to upgrade their roster and upgrade their recruiting class, and you can upgrade your wardrobe with ESQ Clothing, which is founded by Notre Dame alum Ge Wang. You've seen ESQ on all your favorite Notre Dame players and coaches with over a decade of making the best custom clothing available. ESQ will help you look and feel your best in 2024. From a perfect fitting suit or sport coat, shirt, or bomber jacket, or that perfect tuxedo for wedding season, check out Ge's amazing work at esqclothing.com. Book an appointment to upgrade your wardrobe today. Mention ISD and get 10% off your entire purchase. Jamie, how you doing? How was your weekend? How are you feeling coming out of the first official visit weekend for Notre Dame?
I mean, I feel the same. I mean, I did take the official. I wish I got some of those meals on that official, but yeah, I don't feel good. Like, I think it's one of those things where all the guys that they're in on that are like the top targets aren't guys that were going to shut it down.
Right.
So like they're still going to finish out the visits. So it's very similar to, like, say, KVA last year, right? Where you have to kind of just let it play out and you got to see where you're at. And I think, like, all you can do is kind of put your best foot forward. And I think if you come out of this weekend and you look at, obviously, the top two guys that we're visiting were Nathaniel Owusu Boateng and Madden Faraimo, and the vibes are very good with both of those guys. That's all you can ask for, right? And now you wait and see what happens. But the one thing about Notre Dame is that I think not just with this staff, but just Notre Dame specifically, is that having an impactful visit doesn't seem to wear off that much for Notre Dame kids, because what you're selling is more of like bigger picture than the flash of it all.
Right. And like we talked last week about how Notre Dame does a really good job when they get players on campus. They do a really good job. They have a good feel for them and what is going to stick with them, and how to message, what they're trying to sell to them. Right. It is kind of it's specific to player, and they do a really good job. You get guys on campus. You've talked about it a ton. I think last year of their hit rate with guys who take official visits is actually pretty good. It's really good. And so one of those players is Madden Faraimo from Junipero Serra out in California. Matt put in a prediction for him. That is who predicted. He predicted him this morning. I know there were some On3 guys that also put in predictions for Faraimo to end up at Notre Dame. Again, he has to take official visits to Ohio State and Texas, so he has not shut it down. He is not we don't believe he's like a silent commit or anything like that. But obviously it's trending very well for Notre Dame. And he is a guy who, again, Matt talked about how you get KVA talking to him about their decision and why he decided to go with Notre Dame. You have Junior Tuihalamaka. These are Southern California players, Southern California linebackers. They decided to move out to South Bend and play defense for Marcus Freeman, Al Golden, Max Bulla, who I said Max Bulla is a star. I think is a star in the industry. I think he knows how to reach these kids. And every time I see him, I think, man, I could see linebackers just lining up to play for him. And their predictions have gone in for Faraimo. What would this mean for Notre Dame in their class? And landing him, where would he kind of make the biggest impact on the field for Notre Dame? Should you choose?
Well, certainly he's like a money backer type, right? Like he's the guy that very much in the Maris Leofeld mold, where he is someone like you see line him up off the edge here. And that just I just whatever giggle when I see that, because he's got the one he's got the big club and then he strips the ball with his other hand. But I mean, there's a lot of like just Maris vibes in general in terms of like, this is a guy who plays downhill physical. He's also a guy, this is his first year playing linebacker. He was a safety the previously to that. So he's got edge rush potential. So there's a lot of like Maris KVA DNA there in terms of his game. And I think right away you think of his impact in like sub packages, his impact in terms of just every down being an off the ball linebacker and just bring that kind of physicality. And I think one of the things too that probably doesn't get emphasized enough is how important it is to kind of have guys with edge on your defense. Like, there's a reason why.
You mean attitude? Is that what you mean by edge?
Attitude, physicalness, like all of that kind of like combined into one, where it's like that part, it's like, kind of like the swagger of it, like all of that, which is something I think if you look at, I mean, definitely it's a linebacker thing, but also like very much a safety thing too. I mean, can be a corner too. You might get an Antoine Winfield type there too. But really a lot of it is, I would say, safety and linebackers, because they're making hits like that, right? Those kind of hits where it doesn't, maybe even that goes for first down, but all of a sudden you light some guy up and clean, and it's like, that's the kind of thing you could change the momentum of a game. Or guys not wanting that next time that guy's coming over the middle, he's gonna have the alligator arms. He doesn't want to come across. And also too, like guys like that aren't intimidated playing against whoever you're playing against. When you're playing Bama, you're playing whatever, like Kurt Hinish, perfect example. Kurt Hinish was the kind of guy, like, even when he wasn't at the level that he was later on, he was like talking crap to guys on Clemson and Alabama. Like he's just that's how he approaches things. And I think that's important. Like, JOK was certainly a guy who had that. He was a guy that I think talk more than people know. Like, I know that like JD Bertrand, along with Maris, both of those guys like talked a lot. Like JD Bertrand apparently was like the biggest like trash talker on the team, which I don't think most people would think, because the guy's like this unbelievable citizen and student athlete and representative of the university. But guess what? He'll smack you in the face and he'll tell you about it after, right? Like, and I think that kind of stuff matters. Having guys like that on the defense matters, because some guys maybe have all these other pieces, but they don't have that piece of it. And people gravitate towards that. And then they all of a sudden start to emulate that kind of thing. And I think it's important. And so in addition to kind of like his regular skill set, which I think is good, but you could just see that he plays with that edge. Tavon Coney played with that edge, right? Aloy Gilman, certainly, right? Like, and obviously there's football intelligence, there are all these other pieces that go with it, but just having that edge, I think, is really, really big.
Yeah. I need to put my hand up here. Madden Faraimo is the name. There's too many. There's a Madison on my daughter's team. There's a Maddox. That
did you say Madison? I didn't.
I think I might have. There's a Madison. There's a Maddox who lives next door to us, our neighbor, and then there's Madden here. So I get names like which one is which there. So I hand up on that. Do you feel like he could play? You think he could end up being a Viper? You think he could end up solving kind of that problem for Notre Dame? Maybe in like a sub package thing, like with Jayden Sneed, things of that nature.
Well, I said that he could do that part of it. That part, I'm confident that he will. That's where he would kind of project. Maybe he does grow into like a regular Viper. Certainly, I think we know now after like Dom Hulak was at camp, and it's not just that he looked good and tested well and all that kind of stuff too, but he was 240 pounds. He's 240 pounds, and basically the threshold for defensive linemen at the NFL combine, when you bring guys in, like they're looking for guys above a certain threshold in terms of like arm length, and it's basically 32 and a half inches, and he's got 32 and a half arm length at 17 years old. So I mean, he fits all these things in terms of like, this guy has this athleticism and he has all these traits that are going to be there. And we'll see what happens with Faraimo in terms of his physical development. But I mean, certainly he's going to help, rush the passer. That's a big feather in his cap for sure.
Yeah, needed, right? Versatility, just period. Yep. Hulak, speaking of him, he didn't he have like a wide receiver type 3 cone? Like he had some testing numbers that were just like, whoa, like he's a really, really good athlete. It's like you pointed out, he's getting bigger too. So that there's something there. I think it's been pretty talked about a lot. Like there's something with Hulak there that he's much better than much better prospect than I think the rating services have him right now. So that's something to keep track of as the senior season starts to, get going. It seems like he could be a quick riser for Notre Dame. So Faraimo taking visits to Texas, taking visits to Ohio State. I don't want to say there's a long way to go, but there are steps that Notre Dame, kind of needs to overcome here. He's going to 2 really good schools there. Ohio State's been kind of they've done really well with linebackers themselves, so that's something to keep track of. We're going to be monitoring that as the months go, and then we'll see if he gets in decision mode. But Notre Dame, Matt put in a prediction for him to land at Notre Dame. Notre Dame looks to be in a very good position. They did a good job with him. Another player that Notre Dame did a good job with.
Hold on, I just want to, but before you kind of jump on that, one thing that I think could be an advantage when I'm talking about football wise. For Notre Dame is, if you think about like Ohio State, they don't use their linebackers in sub package the same way that Notre Dame does.
Yes.
Like they aren't doing the same kind of things that, like, they never had anyone do what Marist did in their defense, right? Like that's not how they kind of have run their kind of sub packages. So, and I mean, Texas, I would say, is a little bit more like that. It would be interesting because I think they might actually project him to play like a Viper type, because that how they run their defense, that it's more of that kind of thing where I could see him kind of there. But I think, like, really, if you're talking about like best of both worlds, just from a football perspective, that's another like big selling point that I think that Notre Dame could have an advantage of. So sorry to interrupt there, Greg.
No, it's all good, and it's actually a good point, and it bleeds into Owusu Boateng as well, because look, we've talked about it a bunch. Notre Dame runs a pro defense. They do. They run pro concepts, and especially with, like, if you really get into the weeds of like if you're on Twitter and you follow some, and most people won't follow these accounts because they're kind of nerdy, right? And me and you, we follow these accounts because we're nerds like this. But like, you can see like where they talk about scheme and they talk about the things that defenses are doing in the pros, in college. I'll see a coverage, or I'll see a defense. Let's go. Oh, Notre Dame runs that. Like, that's cool, right? And I'll think that players notice this stuff, right? Notre Dame can sell that stuff. Like when Notre Dame is the one team that everyone's talking about in the draft, how they just gave Caleb Williams complete fits with what they were doing. And it's like, this is what Caleb Williams has to deal with in the pros. Like, that's a big deal. Al Golden, NFL guy, right? Marcus Freeman, he's a linebacker. He was a defensive guy. That's why he got recruited to Notre Dame, or that why they wanted to sign him as a defensive coordinator. Max Bulla, coming from Alabama, who also, or he was a GA at Alabama, who they also run pro concepts over there. Like, there's so much that Notre Dame has going for them on the defensive side of the ball that isn't like, the school and pageantry and tradition and all that stuff, like real tangible Notre Dame or football centric stuff. And I feel like that hasn't been the case for Notre Dame in kind of a long time, and now it's like, hey, you want to go to the NFL? Great. Like, look at Marist. His production did not merit where he got drafted, but he got drafted because he knew everything that the Cowboys were talking to him about, and he had a skill set that they knew translated because Notre Dame is running the things that the Dallas Cowboys want to do as well. So they knew it translated, right? So that's a big deal. It's a very easy sell for Notre Dame to make, and they've got a dynamic coaching staff. So it all kind of blends, like the point you just made, in terms of like Ohio State's not doing that stuff. Texas is doing some of that stuff, but not completely. Notre Dame's kind of the whole package. And then you factor in the fact that, there's school and the way that Notre Dame approaches life for a college athlete. It all sells really well. Getting into Nathaniel Owusu Boateng, he was on campus. His brother, Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, was on campus. That can't hurt anything. Jalen Smith was on campus talking to him. It seems like things went really well there, right? He's got official visits also that are coming up. He visited USC. He's got Michigan, and I believe he's got Ohio State as well. It's Michigan and Ohio State, I believe, with Owusu Boateng there. It doesn't seem like Faraimo, whatever he wants to do, is going to have any impact, positive or negative, on Owusu Boateng. He's going to do whatever he wants. Jamie, this is a situation. Notre Dame is 100% taking both if they both want to come.
Oh, yeah.
That's a fair take there. Let's just say, how do they complement each other? How do you see them playing next to each other? Should that happen? And then we'll get into kind of how you feel about the Boateng thing, because I know you've got some I know you get vibes too. So let's talk about the skill sets and how they marry together.
Well, I think one of the things is that, like with Boateng, Owusu Boateng, he's a guy who can play kind of like any spot.
Yeah.
Right. Like, because obviously he's played like more inside linebacker at IMG, and I think that's a good thing because he was more of like a space backer previously. And I think he's someone that, unlike his brother, because of his size too, and obviously his brother's playing, he's playing weak side linebacker in the NFL. So it's not like he's doing fine. But when JOK came to campus, he was 190 pounds.
Mm-hmm.
Like he was not even just not ready to play inside, but like not even ready to play rover. Like he wasn't quite at that point yet. Mm-hmm. And he's just a lot further along physically, where he's just a lot bigger. He's going to be a lot bigger and stronger. You see, he's already more comfortable there. And the guy's just a playmaker too, right?
Yeah.
So I think he actually could play Will or Mike. So there's that, even though he has like the athleticism to kind of like go out and line up and like, I wouldn't say he's the same thing where his brother could like carry a vertical, a slot on a vertical route, where you're just is, freaky, and not many humans can do that as a linebacker. But I mean, I definitely think he's someone that can play out there on, like, if you wanted to match him up with tight ends, he could do that. He's someone who should be able to cover really, really well in man against backs. Obviously, he's a great blitzer. I think they're guys that you would play. It doesn't, like, even Faraimo might end up being a Mike too. Like, I would not be surprised by it, but it doesn't mean that he still might not play and rush off the edge.
Yeah.
In sub packages. Right. So I think when you just get guys who are athletes like that, you don't have to worry about. I think everybody thinks it's like, well, we got to have a Mike and he's got to be this certain type, and that's just gone now. I think like it's just as long as the guy has the intelligence, can command and really like call the defense and run that, then I think that's all that kind of matters. So I think I wouldn't be like, those are guys that I just think that they're going to be playmakers, like second level playmakers, wherever you kind of find them, and you just find and get that fit and train them to play. And I wouldn't be surprised if they play together. And I think you look at, say, like Jayden Sneed, who I would say if you're going to compare athletically, I think Owusu Boateng is kind of similar to Sneed in a lot of ways athletically, but Sneed had played so many other positions and was like kind of all around and really kind of needed a lot more development. And obviously he just mentally, he needed to like lock in a little bit more, where I think Nathaniel Owusu Boateng is like much further ahead. So he should be able to like get in the mix as an inside linebacker quicker.
Yeah. And so, I mean, he has his brother as well, who is just like, it's like there's just a natural like following of the sport with him. Like he just has a better understanding of the position and how to play football than Jayden Sneed had, just because A, he isn't playing all over the place, and B, like, his brother's an NFL football player, right? Like they have things to talk about there. He can study him and things of that nature. I'm interested in get your take on this. I think so. Owusu Boateng goes to IMG, right? And I think he is the type of player where the institutional stuff Notre Dame's doing with the Goog renovation and things like that, it's one of those things like he's not going to choose Notre Dame because of that. But I think it shows like their commitment to football. And obviously he's committed to football. He goes to IMG, right? Like that's why you go there, because you want to have that, you want to focus in on football, right? Now obviously there's the academic aspect. And I saw he posted his grades. Like he's a very good student. I think it's a 4.2 GPA that he has at IMG right now. But like, I think that Notre Dame committing to football and resources to football in that way, I think would help with someone like him because of where he goes to high school, right? Like he obviously takes it very seriously. He wants his university to take it seriously as well, right? And so I just think with him, it only helps. And I think it helps with him a little bit more than it would someone else who isn't, is at a Catholic high school or something like that. Like these things matter on the margins, right? Like maybe it is just like a marginal difference that allows him to kind of make the decision to Notre Dame. What is your vibe here? I'm curious to get your vibe on how you feel about this and his recruitment and where it could go.
I mean, I really don't know, because I think he's been someone who's been ultra positive about like every place that he's gone to.
Right.
I will say that like I think his comments about Notre Dame after this visit read differently to me than some of his other like it seems like he had a great time on all of his trips.
For sure.
This one kind of how he talked about it, and maybe I don't know if that's just how say Christian McCollum asked some questions and asked some certain questions, and it's led to this. And I don't know if some of these other jokers from some of these other sites are just going to be like, "Hey, did you have a good time?" Like, and they aren't really get into it. So I don't know, right? We don't know about all these things. And at Notre Dame, the Notre Dame reporters, because they know Notre Dame is selling a certain thing, they ask more specifically about these kind of things too, right? So in saying that, I don't want to just overreact to what he said, but it did read differently in terms of if you're kind of thinking of just like not the short term and you're thinking of all these other pieces, and I think he has his brother to kind of point to that as well, right? So so I don't know, like I think everyone has all these programs too. As much as people maybe dislike some of these other schools, it's like you can't blame a kid if they go to Texas or they go to Ohio State,
for sure, right?
USC. You can't blame any of these kids. They're all like great choices, right? and they're all going to get, the X amount of NIL money, and they're all going to get this, and you could be a first round draft pick and at any of these schools, right? You could do all these kind of stuff. But ultimately, it's just going to come down to kind of like what he prioritizes. I think how Notre Dame's playing defense and how they're developing linebackers and all that, I think that helps them. But I think it's so maybe that is, if you looked at it from like a different perspective, if they were recruiting him like maybe like a couple cycles ago, maybe they wouldn't have had the same advantage now. But when you're seeing like guys after JOK kind of like develop and get drafted and all that, and then you look at like the young guys that they have on the roster right now, I think that is something that is going to be helpful.
So I think something that helps with him is JOK went to Notre Dame, obviously, and thrived at Notre Dame. But it doesn't feel like he'd be following in his footsteps because I think it's just a completely different program. There's not one coach that is still on the coaching staff that was there when JOK was there, So it's like, yes, I can tell you about Notre Dame, but like you are kind of forging your own path because this is completely different than when he was there. And obviously it's a short time ago, right? Like 2020. Yeah, 2020 was his last year. So like it's not that long ago, but it feels completely just changed. And so I don't feel like he'd be coming and it's like, oh yeah, I'm following my brother. Like I don't think that at all. I think the situation has improved for Notre Dame since then. And so I think it matters. I think Notre Dame can kind of play both angles on that.
Well, the other thing is too, is that they've had so many brothers play in like the last like decade that have played and kind of been their own guys too. Because I definitely didn't feel that like Julian Okwara established himself as Julian Okwara.
Yeah.
He wasn't Romeo's brother. Maybe when he first signed, he was Romeo's brother, but by the time he left, he wasn't. And even like Nick Martin is, Zach Martin's brother. Well, I mean, he was a second round draft pick. It's like he wasn't always in his shadow. Right. And I didn't really feel like really any of the guys were kind of in their brother's shadows, and they've had quite a number of them, right? Like even like Donovan Heinisch right now too, I think he's still got to obviously work his way up to do what Kurt did. But even if he doesn't do that, he's still his own guy, and he's still kind of like, establishing kind of like himself. Right. So, I think that is kind of like a selling point, actually, that you could say like, we're not trying to be like, hey, you're just like, we're not going to remind all these people like, hey, be just like your brother. Like that's, because he is, even though obviously they're both great athletes, but like, they're not the same. They're not the same. So they don't have to be the same.
Right. And so I just think it's playing into Notre Dame's favor right now. And it's like, we'll see where that goes. I'll be honest. I did not think we'd be realistically in a situation where Notre Dame would land him specifically and B both of them. I think that's, I don't want to say, I don't even know where I'd put the percentage.
Well, it's a possibility.
It's a real possibility. Like I would put it at like at least 50%. And like, look, 50%, it can go either way. I just think it's a lot more realistic than I would have predicted like 2-3 weeks ago. I just think they've done a great job.
These visits,
they've done a real good job with those two players. And so if you're looking for someone to do a real good job with your website, then what you can do is you can go to Ben Marketing, which is if you're ready for a new website, not sure where to start, let the experts at Ben Marketing help. With experience in working with Fortune 500 companies and small businesses alike, they'll build you a stunning website and take care of all the marketing tasks so you can focus on running your business. No more stress. Just leave it to the experts at Bend Marketing. Visit bendyourmarketing.com/ISD to get started. Don't forget to mention ISD to enjoy 10% off your first project. Ben Marketing is like they're like the Chad Bowden of setting up your website. You know, like Marcus Freeman, he can't handle all that, the bells and whistles of getting these visits set up. Chad does it for him, and then he can focus on just selling these guys. That's Ben Marketing. You want a website?
That's a great analogy.
They'll take care of your website, and you just run your business, and that's what you do. So hit them up, bendyourmarketing.com/ISD. All right. On campus right this second, Jayden Blair, safety. He is on campus now. Very soon, Dylan Robinson, wide receiver, will be on campus. Those two, they're going to be at Notre Dame together. Things have been trending for Jayden Blair, which is good because there's some Ivan Taylor stuff going on. We'll get to him in a second. Jayden Blair is here. I guess with the questions surrounding Ivan Taylor, how big is it that Notre Dame lands Jayden Blair? Maybe even like big, is it bigger than it was like a couple weeks ago when Ivan Taylor wasn't kind of
I'd say
looking
probably, yeah. Because I mean, I just whatever. I don't want to get. Want to get into the Ivan Taylor stuff. We'll get into it later. But I just
Yeah.
think, just even the possibility that you think that he might not be in the class, that you're like, well, they need another guy who could play safety. And I don't even know for sure that Taylor, he might even just be a nickel or whatever. But like, that might be his primary position. But I just think that Blair becomes that much more important for sure, because they would need another safety for sure in the class, I think. And I think you see a lot of this stuff. To me, this is what you like, is that you see these plays, him making like downhill on the perimeter, like taking good angles, aggressive angles, playing physical. Like, you love that, right? You love that. And he's like super long, right? He's super long. He's big. You love the frame, all that kind of stuff. I would say the one thing is and I know, I'm sure that they're selling him the whole Kyle Hamilton thing. And I'm sure I mean, of course, you're a 6'4" safety. Wouldn't you try to model your game after Kyle Hamilton? Of course, right? Like, you want to be a unicorn just like him. But I don't really think that, like, I think there's a little bit of separation between Blair and Hamilton. I just think Hamilton, and I don't care how Hamilton tested. He tested good as an athlete. I know he didn't run a good 40, but like, he tested really, really good as an athlete overall. But he popped way more as an athlete than Blair, and also popped more in terms of like the deep stuff, like playing single high, playing deep half, doing some of that stuff that I think you see more from him than you see you see, or you saw more from him than you saw from Blair. So I think that's kind of like the difference, is for all the people who are like, is this guy like Kyle Hamilton? Not exactly. Not exactly. I mean, the 6'4", the length, all that, sure. Some of the stuff with the perimeter, what he can do, like playing downhill in the run game, yeah, definitely, right? But like, just overall, I would say ball production and just that kind of, I would say, like, Hamilton, just so incredibly intelligent and instinctive. And that's the part. He could be 3 inches shorter and still be an elite player. That's the one thing about Hamilton, is like, everybody thinks it's this. That helps. I mean, it definitely helps, but that's not all. That isn't what makes him just great, in my opinion. So I think that's what's a little bit missing. I think, you'd like to see a little bit, like, he's good recognition, all that kind of stuff, but not quite instincts, I would say, on the level of Kyle Hamilton, because Kyle Hamilton was like, 10 out of 10 basically in that category.
He's the best safety in the NFL right now. Like, he's just different, and I think everyone's kind of doing him a disservice by talking about Kyle. And it's everywhere. It's just you shouldn't put that on him. And here's my question to you: where do you put Jayden Blair in like previous classes, right, for Notre Dame? Right. So like last year they got Bronte Johnson, they got Tay Brown, Benny Powell. I feel like I'm missing somebody. Who am I missing?
Kennedy Urlacher.
Kennedy Urlacher. Like, would you put him above those guys?
Yes, but I would say Bronte Johnson has a higher athletic ceiling.
Yeah, because but
Blair's a better football player.
Blair's a player, and I think the class before that, right? Like, obviously it had Adon Schuler in it. They had Bowen. He's not a better football player than Bowen, but like I think he's a better prospect than Adon Schuler is, or at least as good, right? Like they're kind of different football players, but so what I'm saying is like among the safety prospects that they've landed, like he's kind of at the top of that, right? So like when you get into comparisons to like maybe the best safety that's ever come through the program, like maybe we don't need to do that, right? Like maybe we just kind of look at like this is a really good safety for the class, and he's going to be an addition to what they want to do defensively, right? Like that's kind of how I look at Jayden Blair. There was a Blayberg said Jayden Blair looks a little slow. He will look slow because he's long, right? He's a very long player. Like a lot of people kind of said this about Kyle as well. To me, how I gauge it is when he puts his foot in the ground and he comes to support the run, where is that play being made? Is it being played 5 yards down the line, downfield, or is it at the line of scrimmage? Because if it's at the line of scrimmage, then he's getting downhill pretty quickly, right? Regardless of how he looks, where the play is being made is at the line of scrimmage, and so that kind of shows me like hey, he's got some pretty good explosiveness coming up, and so that's kind of how I gauge it. All right, let's get into the Ivan Taylor part of this, right? Because a lot of people have a lot of questions. Took an official visit to Alabama. He's going to be at Notre Dame this weekend. And to me, it's interesting because he's coming when the defensive visit was the weekend before. So he's coming during like the offensive thing. That doesn't really matter, but like that's not how Notre Dame would have planned it, I don't think. So he goes to Alabama last weekend. He's at Notre Dame this weekend. And then the weekend after that, he's going to be at Michigan, right? And these are all official visits. It's not good news, right? Like this is not a good thing, right? It is not a good development for Notre Dame. Do you think that Notre Dame fans, I guess, do you think they should be panicked about this? Do you think that they should be what is the concern level, I guess, do you think surrounding this situation?
I mean, I think they should be concerned. He's taking other visits. Like,
right.
If he was all 100% sold, he wouldn't be taking these visits. I think that's just pretty much what it says. I don't care what, Notre Dame's communicating, saying, oh, they're not worried about it. Really? Okay, sure. I mean, maybe you're thinking that in your head or whatever. It's just like, if my girl was going on dates with someone else, I'd be like, okay, yeah, I'm not worried about it. She'll come back to me. I hope. Like, I don't know. Like, I think they shouldn't worry about it until they shouldn't worry about it until after this weekend. I think if he still goes on the Michigan trip, then I'd be like, okay, I just whatever. Like, I think they should take for the most part, people should take a wait and see approach with what kind of happens here. Because I always just think too, if he's taking his visits, just wait and see. And if he comes out and publicly says like, nah, I'm done, whatever, I'm Irish, Notre Dame, that's fine. Then I think you lock it up and you say, cool. But I think that was the one thing with like Peyton Bowen was always like, yeah, my brother's going to check this out. So he was always just going to a million other places.
Yeah.
So even if he was coming back to ND, it didn't matter. He was going to these other places. He was always listening. His dad was always looking for the bag. There are always these kind of things that were going on, right? So, I mean, I don't think Ivan Taylor's looking for the bag. That's not whatever. I'm talking about Peyton Bowen. But obviously, Ike Taylor doesn't need a bag. He's doing fine. But I think one thing, I don't blame anyone, like a guy specifically like him, for kind of looking around after he was already committed because his coach left. Chris O'Leary was the guy he committed to. He was going to play for. Yeah. And he probably had some questions about how's this going to work with, Mike.
They don't really have a coach. That it's like Mike.
Well, they
Mickens.
do, but they don't.
No, but
it's not the same. It's not.
It's like, well, they don't have a safety coach, right? Like it's Marty Biaggi, right? And it's like he's the special teams guy. He's not a committed safety coach. He isn't, right? So to your point, like you do make a good point. It is now. It's a totally different situation in terms of what he thought he was going to be getting. Chris O'Leary has a good reputation, right? Like he's an NFL safety coach now, right? So it is. Jay Patterson Mickens is the GOAT, but he is not the safety GOAT. Like he isn't. He's a corner coach, and everyone kind of knows that, right? I get it. I get that.
It might be totally fine. He might get all his questions answered this weekend. But like, I mean, I know if I was someone that I committed to this coach thinking like I'm going to get this, I would have questions about it.
Yeah,
I would have questions, and I'd want to know more about it. It's the kind of thing that you would want to get answered. And I would want to know like all this kind of stuff about like Al Golden's involvement there and all that kind of stuff. I think all of that kind of stuff. And it's just like whatever this Jay Patterson trusted Mickens. It's like, I mean, no one's doubting that Mike Mickens is a great coach.
I don't need to trust in anything. I am not the player.
He's not. Yeah, he's not there.
And I'm not even saying like I'm actually not as concerned as probably I should be. Right? I'm not. I think the fact that he's still committed to Notre Dame, like I think it's a big step. Like it's a much bigger deal if he would if he had decommitted, right? And it's like, well, I'm still going to go on these. I'm still going to visit Notre Dame or whatever. That would have a totally different feel to it. Like I think the fact that he hasn't decommitted from Notre Dame is a big deal, and I think that every player is kind of different. And I think we're kind of in a different place with Notre Dame. And you know what? Like credit to Marcus Freeman for like being adaptable to the situation and meeting the player where he is and being like, you know what? If you need to take officials, then take officials. We will be here for you. You're going to come to official with us. I agree with you, Jamie. If he goes to Michigan after this, I'd be a little bit, a good amount more concerned than I am, but I don't think that would be the end of it. And Sergio says that's a whole. Oh, he's talking about something else. He's talking about Madden Faraimo. So I just think that the fact that it's all kind of out in the open is also like, I think a good thing. Like there are so many times when it's like, oh, like okay, Sean Terry, perfect example. Whereas, like, man, he went to Missouri last week. Like Sean Terry went to Missouri a couple times, and it was like one school. It's like you just kind of feel like when it's one school and it's kind of like not out in the open, like, yeah, I'm taking an official. That's when you get kind of like, you're not being super transparent with the staff. It's people aren't really sure what's going on here. Like that's when you get a little bit more like bad feelings about it. I think the fact that it's so public, it's like it's almost a positive, right? Now, again, it's not a good thing. It would be much better if he wasn't taking any visits. It would be much better if he was just visiting Notre Dame. But that's not the situation where it is. We're gonna have to monitor.
Yeah, and just to kind of like build on that too, like I think when there it's also a lot different if someone's like publicly like, I'm just like DMs are open, guys. Like just like, I want to hear it, right? Like the whole someone brought up, I'm sorry to I can't remember who brought it up, but somebody brought up like, how's this different from CJ May or whatever? And it's like, well, to bring back the kind of like, oh, you're going on dates with other girls now. Like, I mean, CJ May was like putting up pictures on the gram with all these other girls. He was like, doing all that. Like he just wanted the clout. Like that's what he was about. And that's fine if you want to do that. But it was like, that's not someone who's committed at all. Right. That's not someone that's someone who could flip on a dime. Right. You're just like, why is he taking pictures with these other girls? Like, it's just, you wouldn't want that. You wouldn't want that. And yeah, I think that, you got to let it kind of play out. There's no need to freak out about it until, we'll see what happens this weekend and then see if he takes the Michigan visit. And even if he does take the Michigan visit, you still got to see. But I will say, because kind of to your point though, Greg, about how it's like a different, not all the defense guys are there.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Ethan Long is going to be there. So that is another guy,
fair point.
Safety, who's going to play. So that's the thing. And I think it is also big that like Deuce Knight is going to be there, because Deuce, that is the guy who should be kind of leading the push. He's kind of leading the push anyways for a lot of guys. So, I mean, he's going to make his own, Taylor's going to make his own decision, but like you would want a guy like to hang around Deuce, because Deuce has that kind of magnetism around him.
Deuce, he's always at Notre Dame. He's always there. No one talk to me about anything that another site says. I don't care. It like that is his that any drama with him is such a site driven nothing. Like literally, he is always at Notre Dame. That's unbelievable. And it's like you're right. You do want him talking to him, and because it's like. It's kind of like, man, let's do this together. Like he's always recruiting for Notre Dame. He always wants them in. So let's see how it plays out. I am not as panicked about Ivan Taylor as maybe some other people, or maybe like another person, if they were taking a bunch of official visits, like would panic me. I'm just not like, I'm not in that place with that situation. Dylan Robinson should be showing up to Notre Dame today. Wide receiver prospect out of Bonita High School in Southern California. Notre Dame lands him. Notre Dame lands Derek Meadows. I think they're in a terrific position with their wide receiver class. Jamie, what do you think here? A lot of people aren't happy with the midweek visit thing. It is what it is. I don't know if I don't know how to feel about it one way or the other. I just think it is what it is. The fact that he's coming on a visit, Notre Dame wasn't even really in on him until very recently. The fact that they got him on an official visit, it is what it is. I assume Notre Dame's going to do a good job. What do you think it would do if Notre Dame were to lock up Meadows and Robinson for their wide receiver class?
I mean, I think it's right there. That's the kind of thing where if you get those guys in the fold, so David Lowe here saying how that Tom Loy guaranteed that Deuce will take an OV to Ole Miss in the fall. I don't know. Maybe he will. I don't know. Who knows? I'm sure. I don't doubt that Tom has good sources, right? Tom should be trusted, right? He's a trusted source for sure. Does a great job, but if you come out of this month and you land Meadows and Robinson, well, then all of a sudden it's just like, Deuce, why am I looking around? Like, right. If he wants to stay home, he wants to stay home. But it's a different dynamic when you have these guys in the class, if these are two of your targets, right? So that's why it's important, right? It's important when you have guys that have legit like freak athleticism, that are like legit 6'3", 6'4", 6'5", like guys who can really play vertically and move and like test like great athletes, because they are great athletes. So I think that's the kind of thing, is I would say, like, it's funny, like athletically, I think Robinson is very kind of similar to Cam Hart, because he's kind of that size too, but he's faster than Hart was. Yeah. And obviously he's better as a receiver too than Hart was. Man, I really think Robinson has a chance, like a very, very, very high ceiling. And because of that athleticism too, like the floor is high too. So yeah, I really think having those two types of guys who have the potential to develop into like elite NFL type guys, that's what you need. That's what you need. Those are the difference makers.
Yeah. I think Robinson is vital to this class. I do. Just because he's such a like a good option, I guess. Like it's a realistic thing that Notre Dame could land him, right? And so I just think he's vital. They're in such good position with him. It's like you need to get him in for the skill set that he has and for what he and Meadows can kind of bring. You get the size, you get the athleticism, you get, like you said, these are top draft pick type traits, right? And I don't know that I don't look at Burris like that, right? It's like honestly, I look at Burris like Steve Smith, USC Steve Smith, right? Where it's like, man, that's a good football player. That's a good wide receiver. Played in the NFL for a long time, right? But it's like USC wasn't dominant during that era because they had Steve Smith, because they had other guys, right? Because they had Dwayne Jarrett, because they had Mike Williams, right? When they had those guys and then Steve Smith with a compliment, like I think that's the type of talent that Meadows and that Robinson have. Is like they're the Dwayne Jarrett, they're the Mike Williams, right? They're those star receivers, and then you have those complementary pieces. So that's kind of how I see that playing out. So we're going to have to keep track of that situation. And look, you're going to want to stay locked into ISD for that, because Matt Freeman is always on campus getting photos and videos of the commits while they arrive, while they show up. You get to see them interacting with the Notre Dame staff. We all know how important photo and video is to making things pop and look good. And if you need something to pop and look good, then you're going to want to head over to VSRmedia.com or VSRmediacompany.com, founded by Notre Dame football pregame host and Emmy Award-winning anchor Vahid Sadrazadeh. VSR Media provides professional and cinematic video and photo. Whether you're looking for a collegiate or pro-level highlight reel, have a personal story to tell, or aiming to diversify and grow your business, VSR Media specializes in short and long form video storytelling, social media management, and website design. VSR Media also captures professional headshots, senior and sports photos. Contact them at VSRmediacompany.com and mention Irish Sports Daily to receive 20% off your first project. Visit them online or give them a call at 574-800-9106. Jamie, Deuce Knight, MVP of the OT7 7-on-7 passing tournament. I have a question about this. So here's the thing. The quarterback goes to a 7-on-7 passing tournament. Two things can happen. He can play really well, or he can play kind of poorly or not so well, right? The fact that he played great, that's good. Okay, that's a good thing, full stop. He played well. I'm curious as to, in your opinion, whatever Deuce Knight needs to work on as a passer, can he work on those things in a 7-on-7 tournament? And I'm genuinely asking, this is not rhetorical.
I think some of it, just in terms of like processing stuff and just like making decision making, like knowing like I got to get rid of the ball, like having that internal clock in your head of like, I got to get rid of the ball. I got to fit this ball in here. Like, I just think any kind of thing where you're like practicing, like making tight window throws is a good thing. Like, I think that is a really good thing. However, like, I mean, playing quarterback at 7-7, it's not even anything close to playing in a game. It's just not, right? It just forget about, even if just taking the rush out of it, which obviously the rush is a big deal to not have a rush. But just even how, we were commenting kind of offline with Matt about how, like, the route combinations aren't exactly,
right.
There's a lot of freestyling going on there. So it's not what you're going to see from, Notre Dame's passing game or anyone's passing game, really, right? Like it's just very, very different. I mean, Greg, because you coach 7-on-7, and it's like it's different what you're doing there. There might be pieces of what you would do in a regular offense, but it's different. The game is different, right? So
sure.
So it's not exactly the same, but I just think the no one would expect that Deuce Knight would be like, man, he's going to be the best quarterback at a 7-on-7 tournament. Because when people think of Deuce Knight, they think of, well, I mean, he's a freak athlete. He's a freak athlete. He can do this. He can do that. He's got a great arm, but he's not going to be the guy who always fits it in there, or you're taking away, the dual threat part of his game, which is like a big part of his game, right? So you wouldn't think that he's going to do that. So for him to go there and, excel and be the MVP of a tournament like that, yeah, it is a big deal. It's definitely a big deal. But I mean, it's at the same time, it's not like 100% translatable. So I don't think people should get too overhyped with it, because there's been like a lot of guys like a Ryan Halinsky, who was, I think he committed to South Carolina, and then maybe I can't remember who he transferred to after. Might have been Northwestern or something like that. Didn't work out for him there, but like he was a guy who like at the opening just lit it up in 7-on-7. He was like just phenomenal, right? Like he was like, wow, man, he's just making all these things, but it's not the same. Like it's not the same. And there's a lot of times too where you're like, okay, well, I got this one-on-one, and if you got like a big advantage in a one-on-one, you could just keep going and going and going to it, and that's something where you're going to look great and your numbers are going to look great. And so it's easy to kind of like overestimate some of that kind of stuff. I think it's a good thing, but it's not something to like kind of be like, don't expect he's going to be 100% this polished passer because of that. Yeah.
What I would say is like, you can't win you can't win the tournament, and you can't win MVP, I guess, by proxy, if you're like an inaccurate quarterback in that situation. Like if you have accuracy problems, you're going to struggle, right? Because look, the thing is like there's no rush, yes, but like the defense is also like dropping back to 7 yards every single time. They know you're throwing, right? Like you do have to throw the ball into tight spots. You do have to place the ball very well, right, to give your receivers a chance to make plays. So I think there's an accuracy piece there that is notable, right? It's
ball
very
placement
notable
for sure.
Yeah, and so that matters. Jason Smith's talking about mechanical stuff, like setting his feet. Here, this is where it gets like super easy to do those things in a 7-on-7 situation, because there's no rush or anything. So you don't have to, you're never moved off platform. You're never forced to slide your feet this way and then set your feet or set your shoulders and throw, right? So that's where it's like, you really want to make sure that like your mechanics and all those things are, they're on point when you're actually playing in a football game. But for accuracy and, decision making and ball placement, like you said, it's just like, it's a great sign. It's a very good sign. It's not definitive in that like, oh, he's now arrived as a passer and whatever he can be. That's not what that is. But it's like I said, it's a really good sign for kind of where he's going as a football player. Because usually, the guys who win this are not the dual threat types. That's usually not how it goes. So Jay Patterson says another Notre Dame podcast comped Deuce to Vince Young. He doesn't know how he feels about that. I mean, if he had a Vince Young Texas career, I would take that. I don't know that I see Vince Young there. I don't really remember Vince Young as a high school player though. Like that's a little before I was watching tape of high school kids on Huddle. Have you seen any Vince Young high school tape?
I saw it back in the day. I don't think he's similar to Vince Young. I think he's the guy that I kind of comped him to was Terrell Pryor. I think that's the guy that I just think athletically he's the most similar to. Kind of long, but like super fast, just like, just a freakish long athlete that can like be kind of subtle about making people miss as a runner and stuff. And was certainly not I mean, Terrell Pryor obviously moved to receiver in the NFL, but I kind of think he's also a guy that if Terrell Pryor, like, kind of because of like the whole like tattoo gate kind of thing and some of all the other stuff that happened, like he was probably someone that if he was didn't have that and played just like maybe even a couple years later and not under like, because I believe it was Tressel, right? Was
Yeah,
his coach.
yeah.
Like he's a guy that if like I think if like he was playing for Chip Kelly or something, right? Like he would have been like, oh my God. Like it just I think that's the kind of thing where like that's one thing I'm very worried about with Deuce is um that I would be worried about if they didn't get Mike Denbrock and he didn't just have Jayden Daniels.
Yeah.
Is like Mike Denbrock helped Jayden Daniels grow as a passer for sure, but he didn't take away what Jayden Daniels was as a runner or anything like that. If anything, he enhanced it. So and still allowed that part of it. And I think if you tried to go and like try to kind of like square peg round hole Deuce, you're ruining him. Like just
Yeah.
build off of all these things that and his talents and he can go far.
I feel like Deuce has a much better chance to, like, when I watch Vince Young and Terrell Pryor to that point, always felt like those are athletes playing quarterback.
Yeah.
And I feel like Deuce has a much better chance of being like a quarterback who is a great athlete. Um, kind of more similar to like I don't think he has this like arm talent of like Michael Vick or anything, but I felt like, man, Michael Vick is a great athlete, but man, he can sling it, man. Like he can like he is a quarterback, Like I just felt like he was a much better quarterback than, or I regarded him as a much better quarterback than those other guys. I don't see Warren Moon at all.
No, not at all. But
But
okay, because this is why though I just think he's like that kind of 2.0 because there wasn't like the proliferation of 7-on-7 when those guys were coming.
correct. Yes.
That wasn't a
Yeah,
thing.
I was going to
There
make that point.
wasn't the
Yeah.
private quarterback coaching like there is now. All that kind of stuff. Like Vince Young wasn't going to Phillip Rivers barbecue thing where they were
Yeah.
getting to work with Riley Leonard. Like that didn't happen back then. So even though Deuce is from Mississippi, he's kind of able to kind of spread his wings and go out and do all of these things that those guys didn't do. It's not the same, right? It's
Like, to
not the
be
same.
honest, like I feel like he could kind of have the Riley Leonard track. Like, because Riley Leonard is, in my opinion, like as a freshman too, like he was a much better athlete than he was quarterback. And now he is growing into that. I think Riley Leonard has a much smoother, like has a cleaner throwing motion than Deuce does. But just in terms of like him having to grow in the position, I think those two are fairly similar. I think Riley Leonard's a very, very good athlete, right? And I think that Deuce is as well. I think they both kind of had that there. Like, so I mean, it's good that he, like you said, he's throwing with Riley Leonard. He's working with him. I mean, like you said, it's like there's so much more ways for these guys to grow as quarterbacks than it used to be, especially when we were growing up.
Definitely.
Like that 7-on-7. Like, Matt is talking about like, oh, they don't have those concepts. It's like, yeah, but back in the day, like they didn't even have these.
They had nothing.
They didn't have this. Like you had high school.
I played in a 7-on-7 when I was in high school, like in a couple of tournaments with your high schools.
Yeah.
And it was completely different. And like, I mean, we did not have big time athletes that, at receiver and all. It's so different. It's so different today than it is. I don't think too many guys, someone brought up George, I don't think too many guys go to George Whitfield anymore. I think he had his nice run, and it was, he ate off of that Johnny Manziel run. And I think he maybe did some stuff with Cam Newton too, but I don't think he helped either of their games too much.
Yeah.
The broom didn't put him ahead. So,
and there's so much access to tape now, right? Like you could just get like these all 22 tape on your computer, on your laptop, on your phone or whatever. Like, well, if we were watching tape, you had to go to your coach's office and put in the VHS and that whole thing. Like it was just, you couldn't just watch tape, and now you can watch tape constantly. So,
I just also want to bring up too, this is just like another beef I have with like the whole private quarterback coaching game is I think it's good to work on stuff that's like off platform and whatever, because I do think it's an important part of playing quarterback.
For sure.
I do. But I'm seeing way too many of the no look stuff these days in some of these videos. Like, I'm sorry. You're like, Stafford can do it. Patrick Mahomes can do it. Caleb Williams can do it. That's the list of people in the NFL. Maybe a Rodgers, I think maybe has done some of that. And maybe he was the first actually. But like, that's not a long list of guys that could actually do it in a game. And name me another college quarterback coming up that can do that. Right? Because that was a big thing with like Buckner. It was like, oh, he can do some of these things with arm angles. Cool. Work on that regular arm angle.
Maybe hit the deep out. Like
work on that regular arm. And like, you know what I mean? I think there's a lot of that with whatever. It's just like, it'd be like if I'm training defensive linemen and I'm always like, well, we're always working on like some crazy spin move counter that you would maybe could pull off once a generation. Like, this is a perfect example. DeMarcus Ware, there's a famous clip of him doing the fake spin move against Joe Staley, who was the left tackle for the 49ers, first round pick. He's like a borderline Hall of Fame guy, right? Great player for many years. Played for Brian Kelly at Central Michigan. So there's a famous clip of DeMarcus Ware earlier, he had worked him early in the game. He had the spin move. He did it. And then he did the fake spin. Joe Staley's way of playing it was he spun with the guy and then picked him up. And it was great until he got faked with the spin and then beat bad. And it became like a highlight. Well, they showed that clip to like the defensive linemen who were at the opening the one year. And it was like Brian Breesy and like all these guys who were there. Like every single one of those guys tried that move. And it was like, no, don't you understand? Like, you can't do this move. Like I've never seen anybody else pull that off in a game. Maybe someone will one day, but it took like 5 steps to get to that move. And also DeMarcus Ware, Hall of Famer. Like, it's work on that stuff that you need to work on. And, chill out on the no look stuff. Like, it's like there's a lot of stuff LeBron James does great at basketball. And yeah, he does a ton of no look stuff too. But look at just the guy, fundamentally him just throwing a bounce pass and how good that is, right? Like all that kind of stuff. So anyways, there's my rants over for that.
Do the easy stuff first and then do the hard stuff.
Yeah. Get good at the easy stuff.
Yeah, that's the lesson for today. All right, that'll be the show for everyone. That'll be the show today for everyone. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. If you like what you heard, please hit the like. Please hit subscribe. Please hit the notification bell so you know whatever it is. We are going live. Links to the show are in the description below. As always, we'll be back on Thursday. Probably talking more recruiting. Maybe there'll be more news out. We'll get some updates on visits. Jayden Blair and Dylan Robinson. And then we'll talk about the upcoming visit weekend for Notre Dame. So we'll talk to you soon. Keep hitting.